Welcome to A View from the Summit, where we explore the unique relationship between humans and animals. Whether it's an Olympic partner or couch buddy, a working companion or unique pet, a world champion or someone you think the world of. Join us for a look at animals in our lives. Brought to you by Summit Animal Health. Hello, everyone, and welcome to View from the Summit. My name is Steve Searcy, and I'm your co-host. And joining me is the other co-host way up in rainy, cold, miserable Minnesota, where she rides horses and tries to wrangle the two other people that are in her house, Robin Benson.
Hey, Steve, thank you. I tried not to wrangle them too hard. It's easier to run them into a chute or something like that. But usually, actually, that's the cattle, not the people, right? Although my daughter does love running into the cow chute and pretending she's a cow. So that's just the circus around here. It is kind of cold and rainy, but it's fall. And I will say the leaves are still pretty. So we're going to roll with that. But welcome. I'm so glad you all are here, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify. We love these episodes because we get to chat with amazing people from all over the country who love animals and who make their living with animals, explore their passion with animals. And today, Allison Springer is with us. Allison, welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, super excited to visit with you today. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're chatting from today, and a little bit about what you do.
Well, obviously my name's Allison Springer. I am a 3-day event rider. That is my main sport. I am based in Upperville, Virginia, which is Northern Virginia, right near Middleburg, if you know that area. But my amazing accent is from the Midwest. I'm actually from outside of Chicago. I grew up in Barrington, Illinois. I moved here officially in 2003, and I call it home here now in Virginia.
Awesome.
And the weather in Virginia today is perfect, no doubt.
It's really nice. It's, I like it when it starts to get a little cooler. We had an epic drought this summer, and that was no fun, but we've had a lot of good rain, and it's cooled off a little. And I've got my dad who has just moved out to Virginia. My parents have just moved to Virginia from Illinois. Unfortunately, really loves mowing. So I texted him this morning. He's been in town 2 days. I'm like, Dad, do you want to do any mowing today?
That's perfect. I love it.
It's perfect. Yeah.
That is, for sure. And so for people listening, watching, who maybe are not familiar with 3-day eventing, what is it? I grew up 3-day eventing also. So it's as near and dear to my heart. It will always be probably my favorite thing to do, run through the woods fast and jump over big stuff. But
yeah. Well, it's sometimes referred to as a triathlon of equestrian sports. So it consists of 3 different phases. Your first phase is dressage, which is another Olympic sport. And then our second phase is cross-country. Dressage is no jumping. You have a set pattern in a rectangle, and it, judges the training and harmony that you have with your horse. The second phase, the fun phase, really fun phase, which is probably why you do 3-day eventing, is cross country. So you are galloping in the open and through the woods, through terrain, water jumps, ditches, banks, technical combinations. It's pretty fun. And then your third and final phase is your show jumping, another Olympic sport, which everyone would be familiar with, jumping over the colored rails, and you get penalty points for, dropping fences and time faults and refusals, etc. So the combined, your first phase dressage sets your base score, and then the other 2 phases you add jumping penalties to that, and whatever your final score is how you shake out in the order, and that's your result.
Well, running through the woods at 25 or 30 miles an hour, there's a certain amount of risk in jumping over some of the obstacles, isn't there?
Yeah, but there's, risk in everything you do with animals for sure. I think your goal is, and the neat thing about eventing is as you progress up the levels, obviously it starts at starter, then beginner, novice, just like preschool through graduate school. the questions that are asked in a dressage test sort of coincide with the level of difficulty of the questions being asked jumping. So there's a preparation and progression of your, throughout the jumping. And, really, it's only fun when you feel safe doing it. It's not actually fun when you don't feel safe. And like anything in riding horses, you don't feel safe when you lack communication or there's a bit of question mark. So you don't put yourself in a situation like that. You work on your training, and hopefully you and your trainer make good decisions about the appropriate level you should be competing at. But I always say riding horses should be like, skiing. I was a ski racer growing up, and I love that I do it recreationally now. It's, ski the runs that you want to. If you're a blue groomer or a green groomer, you do that. You don't have to ski moguls, it's just enjoy your animal the way you want to, and they want to enjoy you. And that's what's important.
That's great advice. I read somewhere that you like to work with difficult horses.
I like working with horses, period. I think what I enjoy most is developing communication and good foundation. It always goes back to foundation. I do not believe horses want to be difficult. I think horses individually are like people are individually. Some people are scaredy cats. Some people are a bit nervous. Some people are yes people. Some people have a hard time struggling to find the answer and need a little help that way. So for me, I love the process of training horses and riders from the foundation up. And I do feel like when, I have a number of people and horses that come to me for training because they're having issues or a problem, and I love helping find that where it is in the foundation that there's a break and helping to go after that. I also have many people that come to me, and I love all my aspiring Olympians that come. They're like, what is the secret to competing at the highest level? What is that gem of pearl of it? And well, it's actually the foundation stuff. That's what makes the challenging stuff so much easier for your horse to understand when that foundation is very solid. So we oftentimes are going back to that, even with your most advanced riders and horses.
Love that. So you talked about ski racing growing up, and were you doing both horses and ski racing, or did you start horses after?
Yeah. So obviously I did tell you before, I grew up outside of Chicago. So my ski team was Wilmot Mountain, which I think was an old landfill. But the Midwest actually produced a number of great, especially slalom skiers. When I was racing, that was back in the day. I think Christina Kosnick came out of Buck Hill up in Minnesota. That Buck Hill program turned out a number of excellent racers. So I was a decent slalom skier. I wasn't extraordinary. I was decent, and I had a lot of fun. When I went to college, I went to Bowdoin College in Maine. So my senior year of high school, when I applied and was accepted and all that, I was excited to race for Bowdoin because they were Division III, which means, I'd be able to be on the carnival team, be part of the race team, probably not have to kill myself training, and have a nice, well, they did away with Division III. And so we were all Division I, and I was, getting my tuchus handed to me every weekend by ex-US ski team members. And it was very bitterly cold in Maine. I just remember being in the start house at Sugarloaf, and there was like this yellow sheen to the mountain. It's like there was no snow on it. It was just looked like yellow ice. And I was so cold, and it was GS. So I was seated way back for GS, and it was tough. I'm like, and I'm not a quitter, but I'm like, this might be a good time to do this sport recreationally.
It's so crazy how much we have in common. I know we chatted a while back, but I was a cross-country skier, high school.
Oh, great.
Recreational mogul. I grew up in Vermont, mogul skier. And then I raced slalom and downhill in high school my senior year, but I went to Bates College. So I
Oh
know
my
exactly.
gosh.
And I trained at Sugarloaf on the cross country team for Division I. So
Oh,
like we're so parallel because
what a small world.
it
That's
is
so
such a small.
fun.
I totally like Sugarloaf and Black Mountain and the smell of the paper company water. Like
Yeah.
brought your own
Yeah.
water bottle because the water tasted like, the paper company
Oh my
smelled.
gosh. Yeah.
Such a
We
small
actually
world.
did our ski camp, wintertime ski camp out of Sunday River, which is
Oh, yeah.
great mountain. But I remember we were there for ski camp and we couldn't leave the hotel like 2 days in a row because it was too cold to open the mountain that day. I'm like,
Yeah.
What?
I completely understand. We would go to Quebec City sometimes for the Nordic because they didn't have, or we'd ski on the Alpine slope because they didn't have any snow certain times of the year. But it's crazy, the similarities. Obviously, you like adrenaline, right? Because downhill skiing, I mean, cross country, they used to call us uphill skiers, but the downhill ski team.
Yeah.
And then cross country, we used to say we rode dressage. I love dressage, but we used to ride it, to get to cross country.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's all a lot of adrenaline. And you talk about the foundation and the, helping people really get to that so it's safe and how maybe what are some tips you have? Obviously, you've helped a lot of people. What are some tips you have that maybe can help people who aren't competitive eventers, but it's the foundation, right? So what are some tips that for people listening who maybe are recreational riders who maybe have a challenge with their horse?
Well, I think number one, there are a couple of things, but two of the things I really focus on when I go and teach clinics and teach my students, like two of the big goals. One is very correct equitation. Equitation isn't just to look pretty in the saddle. It is how you accurately feel what's going on and how you can deliberately with body control communicate. So I'm very, very big into correct equitation, which for whatever reason in some of the eventing world and low level riding and just general riding, it's not drilled into people enough. And the ability to have a very correct lower leg position in your jumping saddle, how to correctly hold 2-point, come back to full seat. I am very much so more of teaching an automatic release sort of, so it's all balance over your leg, athletic stance, I think that's really important. And then two, understanding how horses learn and how they're trained. I oftentimes sound like, sort of a natural horsemanship sort of person, but that all they're, what those good people doing it, they teach people how to understand and train their horses better. They talk about where I feel like a lot of people going to lessons, I hear instructors telling them exactly what to do with the rein and how to do this to create something, to create a frame, it's like, well, how, why does it all work? What is it that the horse is going for? So we always have to understand a horse is seeking a release of pressure. They're seeking comfort, right? So when we see horses doing things we don't like, so either they find a release of pressure through comfort and clarity, like, okay, if I yield to this pressure, I'm going to find a release of pressure. When a lot of pressure is put on a horse and they can't find a release of pressure, oftentimes that's when we see the things that we don't like, whether they buck, they rear, they bolt. They're trying to get us to stop riding, or they're going at pressure to create a release of pressure. And you can watch this simply watching horses in a field together. You turn two horses out, it might start with a sniff and maybe a little ear pin and one moves away or and then it's over. Or maybe if there are two horses that are a little bit higher up in that hierarchy, you might have the squeal and the paw. Eventually one moves away and there might be a shakedown. But one will move away and you kind of get that. And even when you have the two horses that are very best friends in the field, it's pretty rare that you put one bucket of grain out and they eat out of it together. One's just a little above the other. Now we want beautiful partnership in our riding with our horses, but for real safety reasons, you have to be just a little bit above them, just as leadership. So when you do put a little pressure on, they know to yield, to yield it. So when we have a horse that's real spooky or flighty, if you're not even part of the herd or whatever, you're toast, so that's not being dominant or anything, but you do have to, just how they learn. We want them to when we're riding, we want them to listen to very light aid. I always tell my students, I want you to teach your horse to be easy enough for your feeble grandmother to ride, right? So when you start from a place of good equitation, you think what you want, and you ask them with the lightest aid, that feeble granny aid, even if in your mind they're not gonna understand what that means. Then you have a very short window of opportunity to explain what that means, whether it's a crescendo of aids or a tic-tac and whatever. But the most important part, when you begin to sense their try or their thought, completely release the pressure, right? Total release of pressure. And then the release of pressure is your most powerful tool riding, right? Because that's what makes them more understanding of when we use our aids. When I talk about pressure, I'm talking about our aids or whatever that is, so those are kind of two really important things to me, equitation and the understanding of how we teach them to listen to our aids in a very systematic, correct way, because they want to understand, and they really do want to be the happy, generous animals that they are. But when they're confused and there's too much pressure, they go at pressure. I get a lot of people that come to me, oh, my horse bolts after the fence or it bucks. So what happens, the rider's a little nervous, they jump a fence, they immediately pull on the reins and lean back. So through, and a horse goes the way they think it's going to go. They think it's going to go away because it's consistently been happening. So if they consistently get pulled in the mouth after the fence, they're going to start protecting their mouth. They're going at pressure. So a very simple fix for a lot of people is trying to keep them in balance, make sure your lower arm's in alignment to where you want their mouth to be, show them balance and softness, and ride forward. So it's not landing and pulling, but showing them the balance and being relaxed for it. And it goes away pretty easily with a lot of horses when we start thinking about getting into their mind and helping to understand why things are going on.
Allison, that is so logical when you explain it. that is so logical. Wonder why that, when people get on a horse, they forget all about that.
Yeah. But I think spending time with your horse and watching horses and really learning, and that's, it's, is the most important part. I mean, I was recently interviewed, and one of the questions was like, how do you sync inspiration? And I had to keep thinking really hard about that one. I'm like, well, but I mean, at the end of the day, when I really now, after the fact, think about it, I'm like, I feel inspired by my animals every day. I really do. I feel inspired by learning from them and helping and so that probably would have been the better answer, but I was really struggling. What do I do? When do I need to be inspired? What is that? And I was really looking hard for an answer, and I felt bad that I couldn't figure it out. But I'm like, talking to you guys, it is inspiring to just be able to do what I do every day and be around these magnificent animals. So
you mentioned communication a minute ago, and we've talked about on this program how people know that they're communicating with their animal. Tell us a story about when you knew that you were communicating with a horse or a horse was communicating with you. Can you do that? Is there something that stands out?
Well, I think it happens just every single day. I mean, I feel like we're always communicating. That's the language that I talked about. I mean, certainly, some of the best compliments I've ever had is like, oh my gosh, how do you do that in the dressage? I don't even see you asking that horse. My old horse, Arthur, and I had some beautiful dressage tests together. Now, we got so good at dressage because he was so spooky. He was the spookiest horse, and he was so flighty, and he'd alert the herd and just flee. And he was so kind and wonderful, but I really just worked really hard with a number of very good grounds people, like natural horsemanship people and all that. I learned a lot about that, did a lot of that, which is essentially just training of the horse, which is what dressage is. That's just training of the horse, right? So, and then I really, really worked hard on that correct foundation. And I'm like, surely if he gets really well trained and he is perfect at dressage, he'll stop spooking. Well, guess what? They never stop spooking. This is a spooky horse. But the cool thing is, going back to when I was talking about, you know, when a horse gets really nervous or in that flight mode, the great change with Arthur through time, because I was so in tune with him and we'd built in this language and communication, he actually, I couldn't prevent him from spooking, but his mind could stay with me and I could address it about the flat work and I could get him back a lot. But you know, that was the communication, where it used to be, it's like he wouldn't even, he'd see something or he'd hear it and he'd just go into flight mode. And without even considering what was going on. It wasn't him trying to evade work or whatever. He was just being a horse. He was like National Geographic. Like he was a wild, like, alert the herd, run. Like, and I did. I mean, that horse took me all over the world. And I did unfortunately spook and run through spectator roping in Germany and stuff. He was a very flighty horse, but then I could get him, you know, like, but so much was like, and then he would 100% look to me for confidence, like, sorry about that. I wish they'd like help me out here. It's like, I got you, buddy, you know, but they are just horses, you know, so they can't be, you know, just submissive, and you can't, you know, discipline them out of spooking, because it's like they can't help it. And I feel like the horses that do spook and you get after them about spooking because they can't help the spook, because that's nature. But what they do, remember when I talk about they go the way they think it's going to go, they can't help the spook. But if with consistency, they start getting disciplined after the spook, like, don't do that, and they don't know, like, they can't help what they're doing, then they actually, that's when you have horses that get really dangerous after their spook, whether they bolt or do something. But when he'd spook, I'd be like, like, you can't, you know, like, let's talk about line of direction, speed, rhythm, balance, like the ingredients of flat work. Like, no, you know, if you can look at something, but you can't run, you know, like, you got to accept my right leg and go straight. So it was always about that flat work and that foundation. And so I think maybe that's one of the best examples maybe of where that communication is so important.
We hear so often people who have their favorite horse, like Arthur, their best horse that took them to international levels of competition, or their favorite dog, or they always have a quirk. They always have some kind of something about them that kind of forces you to really dig in and spend a lot of time building a trust, building a relationship. Do you think that's a big part of their success? Or do you think the horse is just talented, but, you know, they just have some quirk that is just with them?
Well, I think it's really hard to find when you're talking about elite athletes, those horses that are so extremely talented. It's a small, very small group of horses that are just easy. I think there's something that, you know, makes them that much more athletic. And, you know, but I think also when you're taking them to the highest level, you know, it requires them, you know, that much more training and foundation stuff that you might not even, you know, scratch upon always the surface at the lower levels. But I do, you know, I learned so much with them. I had a horse prior to him, Bonfire, that I had taken to the advanced level, and he was not gelded or started until he was 7 or 8. So he was, you know, a little feral horse. And, I mean, and I was, you know, he was a supernatural jumper. But talk about, you know, like, I just was like young kid from the Midwest, like, you know, doing my thing. But he was one of the ones that really, because I got to a pretty high level with not the correct amount of communication, which obviously showed up in my results. So he was one, even before Arthur, that I did learn a heck of a lot more about natural horsemanship and how to build that on the ground and build that language from working with them and how that translates into the saddle. And that's just it's just a part of it. That's my favorite thing. And that's why, everyone asks like, oh, you love difficult horses. Well, I've had some pretty interesting characters that I've worked with. Honestly, I love easy horses too. I feel like the older I get, like the more important the really good mind is, having the reliable mind. And there's Bandit barking to get in.
That's it. This is an animal show. We're good with dogs, cats.
Are you okay
goats.
if I run and let him in and come back? Because he's gonna
wait a minute. We're gonna time your run and see how fast you are. And
I'll do a little subtle run. Okay.
All right, I'm timing her. By golly, she's at 10 seconds already.
Crazy how much we have in common.
There he is.
There's
back.
Bandit.
There's Bandit. Hey, buddy.
He's so funny.
He's cute.
Tough.
What horse were you the most emotionally attached to? The horse that could really move you, and why?
Oh, I really, and everybody, that question is almost similar to like, who's your favorite child? Or who's your,
my mother would answer that.
I'm going to call you out on that. That's like almost an unfair question because I am so emotionally attached to all my horses. And I have a really, I have a really good, obviously Arthur stands out a lot just because we had so many years together and I learned so much from him. And he's the first one who kind of took me all over the place. But one of my advanced horses right now, Van Dyke, I bought him as a 5-year-old. He has been very challenging to produce. And he's actually one of my summit stories. I think he got a little hurt somehow traveling over in his travels from Ireland over. He wasn't quite the same horse that I had tried. When I was there, but, I bought him from a good friend of mine. We talked a lot about it. We couldn't pinpoint what it was, but I just had to, be his yoga instructor, be his physical therapist. He wasn't limping, but there was something, weird in his body that was just a little bit of traffic jam. And there was a time, and I just kept slowly producing him. And as an 8-year-old, I did take him to Maryland. Oh no, he was a 7-year-old to Maryland 3-star the first, year they had the big 5-star there. And he was so bad. He got nervous and he went Irish rogue on me. He could just go Irish rogue when he was nervous. Talk about going at pressure, and I try so hard to get to him. And I was like, I'm just going to have to sell this horse. I got to figure out, I got to make him better to sell him. And I've just kept going, just thoughtfully and patiently going through the work, and he's just gotten jollier and happier and fabulous to ride. He's now an advanced horse. He's a great jumper. He's really like, I don't know, I think maybe he was a bit manhandled as a young horse because he's, these big horses, it kind of works for them to go at pressure with their friends in the field. Like he can push someone around because he's like a linebacker, like he's just that dude. But he was the funny one. When I was first introduced, a good friend had said, you got to try this summit stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm willing to try whatever, might help. So I said, well, Arthur was retired and he was, he looked a little sore out in the retirement field. So he was, a little bit, or, his ankles had caught up to him. I'm like, well, I'll try it on him because he could use a little something. And then I also have this young horse, this 5-year-old that I can't quite put a finger on of what it is. And I knew there's just some traffic jam in his body. My groom and I very patiently I'm not kidding you. For months, we're trying to teach him to rein back. You know, we could do all this stuff on the ground. She could be with me, but it was just interesting. It was very hard for him. There's a challenge. And so I started him on the loading doses summit. And after, like he was doing rein back within 3 weeks.
Wow.
I don't know, I just feel like it was something that helped overall, like systematically just feel a little bit easier in his body. I don't know what, but those are like Arthur and him were kind of my 2 tests. And that's why I kind of jumped on board those, I tried like my extreme case, I've got the US team vet is my vet. She's amazing. She's one of my best friends. We communicate all the time. Another one of my best friends is my massage therapist. We all have great conversations about my horses, and I just try to do the best to make them their most happy and comfortable that they can be in their training. So that was an interesting piece that I just think helped. Rico is Van Dyke's barn name. So that's been from a time to talk about the whole emotional range. Like I just believe in every horse, but I did get to the point I'm like, I don't even know what to do. Like I'm going to probably have to sell him. Maybe he's just telling me he just doesn't, you always listen to your horses, and then you just kind of patiently kept working on. He's just gotten so much happier, so much more willing to be trained. And so going back to your question about emotional connection, I feel very connected to this horse. He's not my most winning horse, but he's definitely an advanced horse, which there's a lot to be said for that. And he just keeps getting better. So that brings me a lot of joy and emotion to that. So, but I feel like every horse, I have No May Moon in the barn. She's just won a big FEI 3-star last weekend, and she was bred for me by a dear family friend, Nancy Winter, and she's a quarter Connemara, so she's maybe like 15-2 on a good day, and she's winning and competing against the big boys. But she was very, very fractious and spooky and all that as a young horse. It's kind of her breeding. She's by Catherton Dazzler, produces very good jumpers, very good athletes, but they're all a little sharp. And I've just had to go so slow every step of the way, letting her decide what, when she's ready for the next thing. And she is just like the most amazing badass girl. She's so fierce and fabulous. And she goes out and it's this partnership we have and this trust that she has in me. And it's like, we're just in tune out there when we gallop around cross country. It's really, really cool. And that's emotionally, again, just such a huge connection, and she is like, a tough little mare sometimes when she when I'm in my dressage warm up or whatever, if somebody comes closer, her little ears will go straight back. She looks like, like a little personal space bubble that you can't violate with her, and she can be a little bit irrational about stuff, but we are so connected. I know she has a really big trust in me, which is great. So that's another emotion. But I feel like all my horses that I train, I just get so emotionally connected to, and you should do, and you have to be.
So you do like working with difficult horses. You just admitted it.
Yeah, they're all. Yeah.
Tell me, how did Summit affect Arthur? Did he do better?
Yeah, he did do better in turnout. Yeah, for sure. He was kind of back to, just gave him a little level of comfort, and so after those 2 cases, all my horses are, all my competition horses are on a weekly Summit. And my feeling is it's just, helps them to just be a little bit looser, a little more comfortable. When I saw the results with that, I'm like, of course, I would like to do for my horses whatever I can do to make them their most comfortable and happy, because that's when they train their best. It's hard, like what I went through with Van Dyke. We were always trying to figure out what was he not comfortable with, it's training horses, it's some blend of comfort and understanding. So you have to go through the systematic training, and you always ask your question, like, do we have some behavioral issue, or is there a challenge because of a comfort level? So I think it's always important to make sure they are their most comfortable and happy in their work.
That's amazing. I love the story of your mare because I grew up riding Connemara's too. And their heart is, they're small and their heart is amazing. But one thing about 3-day eventing is you are responsible for each phase, right? No one else is getting on your horse and training your horse and warming it up before cross country. So what about your level of training? Like, who do you look to for help? Because it's a lot of pieces. Like you said, the triathlon of equestrian sports, you have to know how to be very good at all 3 phases.
Yeah.
And you're the only one with your horse, right? Which obviously builds a huge bond. But who do you have different trainers for different phases, or do you have an eventer that helps you with all of them, or both?
Yeah, no, I definitely, I have different coaches that I go to, maybe not on a weekly basis. For the most part, I'm running my training program, but I feel like Katie Prudent has been a huge part of my show jumping. That was Arthur's most challenging phase. A lot of spooky horses are uber careful. He was actually not spooking at the fences, but everything around it. So he'd kind of duck and get low, and it was hard to, so that was one of his, she was really helpful for me in the show jumping phase. So and I don't get to work with her enough. I get to work with her a little bit in Wellington in January, and then a little bit in the summer times when she's here in Virginia. But a lot of the lessons that she taught me, and she's very good on the mental game side of how to make you your best competitor. So I think she's super with that. Richard Picken, who passed away a year ago now, he was very helpful. I was able to work with him a little more regularly with the show jumping as well. And I have so many people that have helped me throughout the time, and I've learned so much from. I think, JJ Tate's a very dear friend of mine, and she helped me quite a bit in the dressage phase. And I owe a lot to her for this. Really, her jam is really like the classical correct training of the horse and equitation and all that. So there's so much that I really learned from her. When I came to Virginia, I worked for the O'Connors. I was riding Miss Mars's young horses from that. And so, obviously those were huge idols of mine. So I worked with them for a long time. And, and after that, Philip Dutton for a number of years, has been my coach. But I still, I'll go and get some cross-country lessons with Boyd Martin. He's an excellent coach. And there's all different sorts of people that I'll touch base with and train with. So it's not like I have just one trainer. Bettina Hoy was a fabulous person in Europe that I worked with a lot. And I recently, after having not ridden with her in years and years, she did come to Virginia. I got to take a couple lessons with her, and that was super. So, and that was pretty inspiring to get back into that. But yeah, you kind of need to go to your specialists for sure for, dressage and show jumping, and, our jumping cross country, tends to be more your eventing, your other great eventers. So, but they can certainly help with, other phases as well.
My goodness, Allison, you've not that I'm going to go out and get a horse and try to jump a fence, but you make it sound like that it is a process and that there's a logical approach to being able to do this.
Yes, and that comes from the girl who used to just get on her pony double bareback with her best friend halter and lead rope and bomb around courses. We did a lot of stupid stuff as kids. I was very blessed to grow up, in Barrington, Illinois, where they had an awesome forest preserve system with trails, and the riding center, which was kind of home base for the Fox River Valley Pony Club and the fox hunt and all that. So as a kid, it was just pure enjoyment. And I was probably not focused on all that systematic training at all. I was just pure joy and love of bombing around. And then, and then I think I saw the 1984 Olympics. I'm dating myself on TV. I was a little kid and I saw eventing for the first time. And I was like, I'm doing that. I'm doing that. That was amazing. Jumping up waterfalls. That looked amazing. So, and then you start getting goals and working towards them and learning about it. So, but
yeah, it's amazing. And you talked about, you sound like my daughter and like me when I grew up, and now you've inspired me to get back out my English saddles, because we rope and ride cow horses now, which I swore I used to say quarter horses were terrible. I never wanted to ride them. If they were 15 hands, they were too small. And you know how you are when you're a kid, right? You want the big stuff and you want to go fast. And now my daughter's always saying, Mom, I want to jump. Mom, I want to do this. So you've inspired me to
do it all.
do that too. She does the bareback, no hands, with her pony.
Yeah.
She sets up, you should see our backyard right now, all the logs and the sticks and the whatever. She's got all these
lawn chairs, sprinklers. Yeah, we used to do all that fun stuff.
Pretty much roping dummies, everything. The dog, like, can I jump the dog, Mom?
Totally. Now I did when I 1 year at Rolex, now Land Rover, Kentucky 3-day event, but they used to have the reining championships at the Kentucky Horse Park at the same time. And so they would ask a couple eventers to ride in the reining championships. And I did it. So you can go on YouTube and search it out. It was probably the nicest animal. This was a beautiful quarter horse. I mean, it was such the nicest animal. And talk about systematic untraining of the horse. I started out, the horse was so well trained, and they gave me like, this is how you do the spin, this is how you do the sliding stop. And they asked us to pick a song to do, and then like, these are the things you got to do. You got to do, the lead change, you got to do the sliding stop, you got to spin each way, whatever. And this horse was so well trained. I guess whatever I did right in the beginning actually had me ranked up pretty high with the real people riding. And that's what the judges told me. They're like, had you just ended there, you would have actually placed. But then I picked Born in the USA, and I don't know if I picked the extended version, but it sure felt like that. Because then I'm out there, I'm like, when is this song going to end? So I kept trying to do stuff. So if you watch the video, it starts out awesome. And then by the end, the horse is like, listen, lady, like, we're done with you. So I kind of untrained that horse a little bit by the end of it. Just not really knowing what I was doing, but that was fun. That was a fabulous horse.
I remember that when they did that. I rode reiners for a little while, and it's amazing to see, the differences, but they are, that's all we ride now is quarter horses, but the reiners are, like you say, they're just incredible in their training and their, systems of it all. But talk a little bit about what you talked about, one of your coaches from the winning mindset. I mean, we have a lot of people watching who are recreational, but then there's a lot of, sort of recreational competitors, right? People who do weekend stuff, people who do low level eventing or low level barrel racing or low level play days. And so what would be something you would share from a competitive mindset standpoint for people?
Well, I think the mental game of things is so important, whether you're competing or not, whether you're riding horses or not. I've always believed that we have a lot of choice and we can choose, sometimes, we have to think about how we want to feel and how we want to be in a situation, which I don't think a lot of people do enough. And this is just interacting with people, let alone their horses or dealing with nerves. But I do feel like nerves, that happens whether you're competing or not. And we allow it to go to a place that's too much, right? You actually can have control of it. Now it takes practice, for sure. And going back, Karen O'Connor, who, I first came out to Virginia to work for them. She said years ago, and I still use this today. She's like, it's okay to have butterflies. You just have to make them fly in formation. Which is
I love that.
So true. So true. And there's not a single person who doesn't get nervous or excited going out. I mean, why am I nervous sometimes? Maybe because I don't want that feeling of disappointment you feel when you make a mistake and you don't get it right, or you don't get the result. Sometimes you're a little really nervous about whatever it is, and I used to get very nervous on Arthur's show jumping because it's like, I just didn't know what was going to happen. Right. And that made me more nervous. And then that made me not ride as well. And Katie was really great about, this is how we train. This is how we warm the horse up to go in the ring. And when you go in the ring, all you can do is give him the best ride you can. Like, you just have to give him the best ride. And then the car, and it was just like, when I separated my mind, like, I just got to go in and just try to ride my best. And that's it. Then fate has it. I actually rode better thinking that. But when I was really stressed about having to do a clear round on him, then I'd just be like, changing the canter too much, thinking I was helping him get, or I'd do spastic in my equitation in the air, all this stuff. She's like, you have to ride in your equitation. You have to think really hard about how you're, like, what you're going to do in these lines, make good decisions, make sure, it's just a very good way to separate your mind. So I think that it's really important to work at that. And there's not one way to it. Some people have great success in just listening. There's some great tapes out there. I remember years ago, Jane Savoy, who was a dressage rider, she was a great public speaker and she was super fun to listen to. And she was obviously an enormously successful dressage rider who would get absolutely ill before she had to compete. And she had to convince herself, I love to compete. In the morning, she'd just tell everyone, I love to compete. I love competing. I love to, and it's like her body just kind of followed that after a while. And she just, it might not be as simple as that, but you can't let yourself go to places. And I remember one year at Kentucky, I was particularly nervous about the course. And I did my final course walk with Philip Dutton on Friday night. And one of the best pieces of advice he gave was like, okay, now you have to stop thinking about it. Go to dinner with your family. Don't visualize anything. Don't visualize a course. Don't think about it. Go to dinner, get a good night's rest. In the morning, you can come back and walk it and think about it or watch, but stop thinking about it now. I'm like, wow, because you can let your mind just think too much. And so it does take control, because the human mind can let so much dump in on it, but you can learn how to focus through stuff and focus on the right thing. But it does take practice. It certainly takes practice. And, but I think it's a really important part of it. So when I see people who are so nervous going out on cross country, some people who are so nervous and so ill, and then they're elated after when it's done. Was it really that fun for them to be that nervous going out ahead of time? I don't know. I think it's a heck of a lot more fun when you learn how to focus on, the actionable things that you can do. I mean, there are certain jumps that I've looked at, the Cotsmore Leap at Burley. It's one of the biggest ditch and walls, ditch and brushes that you will ever see. They drive, Land Rovers through the ditch. Is massive. Nobody looks at them like, oh yeah, I want to jump that. So what's going to make me jump it best? I know the canter I need coming around the turn. I know the line and the balance. I know all those things. Those are things I know how to do, right? And so those are the actionable items that I'm going to focus on, because that's what makes my horse's job easy. Never makes it easy for my horse when I'm nervous and just flapping my rings, doing and distract, thinking I'm making it easier by being all sorts of erratic and aggressive. They need the ingredients, and yeah, we need to tell them when they need a little confidence. But what can you focus? What are the actionable items that you can focus on? Sometimes it's just something simple that'll help your horse be so much more relaxed and responsive to you. And that's where you need the help of your riding instructor. And sometimes you need the help of, a coach for your mental game side of it, for sure.
Allison, you have been absolutely wonderful. And I know all our listeners and watchers are going to be concentrating on training their butterflies after this, because that is such a helpful thing to think about. Just fabulous. thank you very much for being with us today. Robin, do you have any parting comments?
No, that's amazing. I've written down a few nuggets. It's absolutely a joy, Allison, to get to visit with you. Completely inspiring. And of course, we wish you all the best as you go ahead. It sounds like you already, congratulations are in order from last weekend. But if people want to get in touch with you, or maybe they're eventers somewhere near you and want to do clinics or lessons, how do people find you?
Well, my website is really easy to remember. It's allisonspringer.com. Right. And then, and you can also find me and message me on Facebook, Allison Springer Eventing. And then you can, I think those are the best ways: website, Facebook Messenger, or Facebook me, and just reach out. It's not hard.
Super. Well, we'll include that in the show notes, because I can tell you guys, if you are riding at all at any level, you want to look her up and get in the arena with Allison. She is amazing, not only with her own horses, but helping people break it down and have success. So we're going to include that in the show notes. And if you have questions for me or Steve, email steve@eternapure.com, and we will share this, and Allison will give you a heads up as we share it. It's going to be super exciting for everyone to get to really experience this, because you're such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you again so much. And don't forget to subscribe, either Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to this, to catch the episode we launch each week. Thank you all so much.
All right. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And you'll see us next week on A View from the Summit.
Thanks, Allison.
Thanks for joining us for A View from the Summit. This program is made possible by Summit Animal Health. Check them out online at summitanimals.com. Thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next week for another View from the Summit.